I don't think anybody is going to be replaced by AI, but somebody using AI could replace you.
Hey everyone, so today's guest has possibly the most impressive career in the commercial real estate industry. This man has co-founded Macy Nackle Realty Services, a New York leading commercial real estate sales firm that closed over 6,000 transactions, over $20 billion in volume. And he's also a personal record-breaking broker, having personally sold over 2,000 transactions with sales exceeding over $20 billion in volume. This man is not only a New York Rangers season ticket holder for quite some time, but more importantly, this man has had an unbelievable career. Welcome to the show, the legendary Mr. Bob Nackle. How you doing?
Good, Henry. Thank you so much for having me today. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, likewise. So I love to do something that I'm sure, a lot of the podcasts have gone into, which is a little bit more about your story, your childhood. I'm very curious. If your younger self met you today, would you be somebody that you're like, oh, I obviously knew I'd be this person, or is this like a complete shock?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but I'll tell you, I grew up in a small town in northern New Jersey in Bergen County, a town called Maywood, very small town, sandwiched between Paramus and Hackensack. So small we didn't have our own high school, so I went to Hackensack High. And I think if I look back, I was very, very into sports. Have a group of friends. There were about 7 of us went to kindergarten together that is still friendly today. We get together, play cards once a year. And 2 of those guys are among my very best friends that I see all the time. But it was quintessential small town growing up, one commercial street with stores on it. Everything else was residential. I've been asked a couple of times, was there anything in your background that made you think that maybe you'd be successful? And I never really thought about it as a kid. You think about all kinds of things, but one thing that I seem to always do is really go all in on the things that I did. When I was playing basketball, I'd practice 4 or 5 hours a day. When I played baseball, I'd be the first one on the field, last one off the field kind of thing. And so I think immersing myself in the things that I did, regardless of what it was something that was always part of me. Like snow days were a big thrill for me. I would get up earlier than I would have to get up for school. I'd get my shovel and I'd go out and I'd shovel people's sidewalks and driveways all day. And as a kid who was 10 or 11 or even early teens, make a couple of $100 shoveling snow, that felt great. So that was the kind of kid I was growing up.
So I hear that you're saying that you go all in on everything you do, right? That stuck out to me. Besides sports, was there anything that kind of caught your interest right away when you were younger?
Mostly sports. Everything revolved around sports. Lifelong, diehard Ranger fan, Giants fan, Yankee fan. Sports was a big part of what it was for me growing up.
Sure. I'm sure it taught you the competitive nature.
Yeah, no, and it's interesting when we were hiring folks for Massey Knackle, we looked for team sports in their background for 2 reasons. One, team sports showed that you could collaborate and work with others, also showed you had a very competitive nature. And those are 2 characteristics that we think are really important for folks in the real estate industry because real estate is so highly competitive.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, I'm curious, before you dived into real estate, was there any other sales job that you had?
No, I had only one job other than in real estate, and that was I delivered a local free newspaper for about 2 or 3 weeks, and just didn't like that at all. That that lasted a very short period of time, but my first job, I got a job working as a summer intern for Coldwell Banker Commercial back between freshman and sophomore year in college, and went back my next 2 summers and then started with CB when I got out of school. So no jobs for me really other than real estate.
So was anyone else in your family in the real estate business that you were like, that's what I wanted to do? Or like what had you go that route right off the bat so early on?
It was a mistake, actually. My dad was a science teacher and then became a vice principal and eventually a principal at a high school. Fortunately, not my high school. My high school principal's son went to our school and he had a very, very tough time because of it. So I'm glad I didn't go to my dad's high school and my mom was a housewife. And, I went to the Wharton School at Penn. Most kids who go to Wharton want to take over Wall Street. That's what I wanted. And I was actually looking for an investment banking or a commercial banking job
Hmm.
that first year. And came out of a Payne Weber office and saw Coldwell Banker across the hall. I walked in thinking the place was a bank, ended up getting hired and just loved the job, loved the people, loved the job. And, it's total serendipity that got me into the real estate business.
Holy cow. So how long were you there before you started your own brokerage? And then why did you start your own?
Okay. Well, I started the career July 16th of 84. Met Paul Massey there. When I showed up at CB had about 50, 60 guys leasing office space, 20 people in the retail leasing division. There were 4 people in building sales, 3 with about 20 years of experience, and then Paul Massey, who had just gotten out of a training program. The boss said to me, "Hey, Massey just started in sales. Follow him around. He'll show you where things are around here." Day 2 on the job, Paul and I were having lunch, and we're like, "Hey, these guys with 20 years of experience really aren't even acknowledging us. Why don't we just work together, split everything 50-50 and see how it goes?" So that was the start of a 30-year partnership. 2 years later, we were made the bosses of the sales division. So those 3 guys who wouldn't talk to us were actually working for us. And then we left to start our own business in November of 1988. And what prompted that was that we had a territory system of sorts at CB, but when the senior guys came up with something in our territory, they didn't want to bring us in on it as the rules prescribed, and the boss backed them up, and we're like, "Hey, the rules are the rules. They have to apply to everybody the same." So at MK, we had a very strict territory system, and those rules applied to Paul and I just like they would to somebody who started the first day on the job. And I think that's the key to having a successful platform is you can't have special deals for anybody. As young kids, I was 26, Paul was 28. We said, let's go out, start our own business, take over the world. And, a lot of it was blind ambition. A lot of it was not knowing what we didn't know. But we did it, and lots of trials and tribulations, trial and error, lots of mistakes. But fortunately, at the end of the day, it worked out for us.
So I'm curious to kind of unpack that because obviously I know you're kind of skipping over an amazing career and a lot of killer points that I really want to talk about today. And I mean, I've been going through a lot of your bio, and I mean, it's just some of the most impressive stuff, especially, we'll talk about a number of your notable sales and everything, because I really want to talk to you when you first started your brokerage, right? It was just you and what was his first name?
Paul.
Paul.
Maybe
Okay.
Paul and our secretary.
Okay, awesome. So it's just you, Paul, and the secretary. For how long was it until you started bringing on agents, and like what was like the vision when you got started?
Yeah, well, the vision was to have a brokerage business that just did investment sales. We had a very, very simple value proposition. Only sell buildings, only work for sellers, only work on exclusives, and only work in our territories. And so, that's a 6-second explanation. It's not vague at all, very clear. We thought that just representing one side of the transaction every time would make sense. No conflicts of interest. Never had to remember what you said to anybody. All we were trying to do was maximize the prices we got for our clients.
Sure.
And out of the last week, I closed deal number 2,321, and 2,319 of those I exclusively represented the seller. I had 2 fluky deals I've done over the years where I did a buyer rep assignment, but just 2 out of all of those. So, it was very, very simple. The whole premise was focus on one small area, get to be an expert at it. Specialization, I could talk about for hours. Specialization is the easiest way to differentiate yourself as a broker. And that differentiation often leads to a competitive advantage. So that's what we did. So we actually brought our first broker on very early, because of the early success that Paul and I had at CB. The regional bosses and even the national bosses had us going around meeting with sales brokers around the country, kind of explaining how we were doing what we were doing. I guess they were kind of surprised that 2 young kids right out of school were having such success in the biggest, most competitive market in the country. And the head of the Jersey operation had this young guy starting with them, Ed Winslow, and said, "Hey, go hook up with Nackle, get into town, find out what he's doing." And so I met Ed. He came in, and for a year or so, we were meeting once every month or two in New York. He'd come in on a Saturday and we'd sit and go through everything we were doing. And we left CB on November 15th of 88. On November 16th of 88, I get a call from Ed saying, "Hey, I heard you guys left, starting your own business. I want coming on board. I want to come in and work with you guys." So about a month later, he started as our first salesman. So, but
Amazing.
it was very slow growth at the beginning. Paul and I had two territories that were adjacent to each other. Ed worked north of Paul. The next salesman we brought on was Jim Ventura, who was one of those seven kids I went to kindergarten with. That's still a good friend. He worked south of me, and we grew the territory system like a jigsaw puzzle. But from 1988 to 2001, we grew to about 21 people. And there was really a big inflection point in 2001, right after 9/11 in New York. A lot of companies were downsizing. We were in a recession. 9/11 happened. A lot of folks were concerned about the future of the city. Would we be attacked again? What was going to happen? So companies were downsizing, laying people off. There were great quality people that were out of work, brokers, attorneys, accountants. And up to that point, Paul and I had been interviewing everyone ourselves. And we said, you know what? This is a once in a lifetime opportunity. There are great quality people out there. New York is tough. We're going to bounce back. This isn't going to get us down. Let's go hire a director of HR and go hire all these people that are out of work. And we grew to the point where 2 years later, we had 150 people. And then when the market came roaring back in 2003 and 2004, we were perfectly positioned to take advantage of that, and had some great years in 04, 05, 06, 07. It was a great time for the firm, but it was a risky move that we made. It could have put us out of business if the market didn't come back. We probably wouldn't have made it through, but fortunately for us, the market did come back at that time.
Well, I also want to rewind a little bit just because I want to go into a few key points you were talking about. One of which was I can totally relate to, two young guys coming into an office, and you have the older brokers who, again, senior, they think they know everything, and then all of a sudden, you guys kick some butt, and now you guys are, you were moved up in a position. I'm curious, what were you doing? Like, again, today we are so fortunate with data. There's so much data out there where anyone can come into this business. You can go on a CoStar, Reonomy, or any software, pick up a phone number, no problem. You can pick up a phone and call. What were you doing back in the 80s that all of a sudden took you from, mid 20-year-olds to, crushing it in the business so quickly?
We dug in, right? We picked relatively small territories. We worked from 55th Street to 63rd Street. Paul covered Fifth Avenue to Lex. I was Lex to First. And we proctologized every single block. We went, from southwest corner of the block around clockwise, get the information on every building owner. Back in those days, publicly available information was very opaque. So we would dig in, we'd find out who the owners were. We'd call the neighbor to find out who the owner was if the owner information wasn't right. Occasionally we'd call up a tenant and say, "Hey, we're from the fire department. You have some violations. We have to get in touch with the owner right away." How do we get in touch with them? Whatever we had to do to get that information. Talk to the mailman. Stand outside. "Hey, do you deliver mail to so-and-so at this address?" Whatever we had to do to get that information. And then we understood what made that area tick. We looked at comparable sales. We looked at historical comparable sales going back years. Who's buying, who's selling, what zoning changes are affecting value. And so as young kids, we'd go out and maybe we had sold 3 buildings and we were competing against folks that had been in the market for a long time. We go into an owner and say, "Yes, we've only sold 3 buildings. One was down the block, one was across the street, and one was right next door to you. We know this neighborhood better than anybody. We can be a better advocate for you to convince buyers why they should pay more for your property." And that resonated with people. And so the traction that we got was very, very swift. We started putting together market reports when most people weren't doing that. I mean, I still have our old newsletters back from the mid and late 80s that we would list the number of sales and what the average price per foot was and what the cap rates were and all that kind of stuff. And that was information the market really wasn't used to at that time. We were very, very granular and detailed about understanding our market. And if something was outside our market, We didn't care about it. We weren't dissuaded. I think that that is something that is a trap that a lot of brokers fall into, that, hey, there's an opportunity over here, or there's an opportunity over there. And yes, you could make money doing that, but how accretive is that towards the next one? So in our system, every single thing you did, every minute that you worked, every initiative that you took on was something that would be helpful to get the next one. And so because as brokers, your two main assets are your time and your knowledge, you have to use your time as effectively as possible. So if you're doing something that you can make money on, but isn't going to help you get the next one, it's dilutive to your overall business plan. And so we tried to do things that would be helpful towards getting the next one all the time. And that's how you get more horsepower out of the time that you spend working.
So I'm curious to get your thoughts on this, right? Just because I'd like to debate just a little bit with you, right? Just to hear your feedback, okay? I'm curious because, like you were mentioning, and especially with New York, where, like, everything's so compact, right? Like you can go a few blocks in every direction, and you have a couple dozen, if not a few hundred buildings, very small period, small geolocation. Let's say that we're talking about middle of the country. It could be any state, anywhere, right? You're talking about a much more suburban area. If you were to focus on just hypothetically even a small city, which is sort of what you're talking about, right? Focusing on one geographic area where one can lead off of the next. I'm curious to get your thoughts on it. Like, okay, well, if that entire geographic location only has so much sales within a 12-month period of time, let's say only, there's 1,000 buildings and only like 2.6%, like you have been mentioning that, New York is always trading at, it's like 2.6%. So 26 sales of 1,000 buildings are only selling, right? And if it's you and a bunch of other people, do you not think it's lucrative to try to go maybe county-wise or 3 cities, or like just to get a little
Henry,
bit?
that's a great question. And clearly the approach that we took works in a very dense, large market. And I get emails and DMs and calls from folks all over the country, and they're like, hey, Bob, I'm in a market that is, a fraction of the size of New York. I can't be a specialist in just one thing. And I totally get that. And I always say that from a specialization perspective, what you want to do is have your area of focus small enough so you can be a true expert at it. You can know everything about it more than anybody else. But that market has to be big enough that you can make a good living doing it. And that caveat is really, really important. So
Gotcha.
in some ways, if your market is too small in terms of the number of sales that you have in an average year, you have two choices to make. One is to increase the geography in which you work to encompass more sales. So go to the next county or the next county or the next city or whatever you have to do geographically, or you decide to get into other strategic business lines where you do sales and maybe you do financing too, or maybe you do leasing, maybe you do what you have to do within that geography. But that is a real issue for folks in smaller markets.
I'm so happy you brought those last 2 points up because, I've had a lot of people reach out to me asking very similar questions, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on this too. So of all the buildings you sold, which I went through, there's obviously a lot. I went through as many as I could. So I'm curious to understand this. Because another thing that I also mentioned, because you said business verticals, I've also mentioned you either have to grow geographically, like you mentioned, or you grow asset wise, where it's like, maybe, like a lot of office brokers are struggling right now because office is obviously, going through some turmoil. So I'm like, again, if you're a specialist in retail, maybe you should switch, or add multifamily, add another asset class or industrial because it's doing very well. I like to, rides, my thing that I've always talked about is always, I like to run with the trends where, like, as an investment broker, I'm trying to find the most lucrative opportunities so my investors can make money. I'm very curious to get your thoughts on maybe even shifting asset classes. Like, did you focus on one asset class or was it just more geographics or?
Yeah, well, that brings up two points that I want to address. One is when we started back in the 80s, because of the opaqueness of publicly available information, it was really easy to be the geographic focus was really important, getting to know the geography, and we were generalists. We sold all types of properties. If it was within the box, we tried to sell it. Today, because publicly available information is so readily available, I think product specialization is much more important. And I'll use as an example, and again, provided that your market is big enough. If last week I sold a retail property, an office building, and an apartment building. And this week I'm trying to list an apartment building. The owner that I'm talking to doesn't care about the retail property or the office building I sold.
Agreed.
So 2/3 of the time I spent working last week is not helping me get this week's assignment. If last week, however, I sold 3 apartment buildings, the owner I'm talking to today, or the potential client, wants to hear everything about all 3 of those. So 100% of my time was helpful towards getting this week's assignment. That is the big benefit of product specialization. Now, I think when you look at, what you do and how you do it, it reminds me of 2 very significant inflection points that we had in the history of Massey Knakal. And one, when we went in different directions at 2 different points in time.
Hmm.
When we started in Manhattan, when we had all of our sales territories filled in Manhattan, we had an inflection point. We said, what do we do now? Do we get into office leasing? Do we rent stores? Do we get into debt? Or do we go to Queens and Brooklyn and try to sell buildings there? And at that point in time, the decision was, hey, we don't know anything about leasing. We don't know anything about debt. Let's go sell buildings in Queens. And we opened a Queens office in 1999. 2001, we opened a Brooklyn office. And we said, you know what? We know how to sell buildings. We don't know anything about these other businesses. Let's increase geography. And so we did that. And then there was a point in time later on where we had all the New York City territories filled. And we were at that same inflection point. Okay, what do we do now? We looked at Boston, Philly, DC, Chicago, and Chicago would have been the next market that we opened up in. But we said to ourselves, if we do open in Chicago, we're going to have to spend time explaining to people who we are and then what we can do for them. We have these very long, deep relationships with owners in New York. Let's just provide more services to them. So we got into the debt business. We got into the retail leasing business. And so 2 different decisions at different points in time based upon what the horizon looked like at that point. I think that to the extent that you can stay as consistent as possible with what you're doing, the better it is. You don't want to keep bouncing around to the flavor of the month, because invariably every sector will have its ups and downs. And so you want some consistency. The more consistent you can be, the more value you're bringing to the client. And ultimately, that's what we want to do, is bring value to our clients. So I think consistency is important from that perspective.
One thing I heard you say before, which was interesting to me, because I definitely would love some more of an understanding, but you made very clear, which is that you work with sellers, exclusives, to only you only want to represent the seller for ease of business, which I definitely can understand. I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. As somebody in nowadays where again, information is so readily available. My teams right now make almost 10,000 calls a day. So we're very heavy prospectors, and we're going to talk about cold calling and all that kind of stuff. I got a list of questions my audience wants to ask you. So we're going to try to rip through that shortly, but I'm curious to get your thoughts. We have so many people these days that are they're open to selling, right? They're possibly open. They don't really have any motivation, right? There's a lot of sellers right now, obviously with interest rates and everything. Where do I move my money? And our philosophy has been for quite some time, and totally open to coaching here, which is just, we're calling up these sellers who may or may not have a drastic motivation to sell. We can get them to sign an exclusive where if we bring somebody, great. But then the goal here is we're just bringing as many buyers as possible to try to get the best price possible. And I've always looked at it as, we're trying to get the best price typically for buyers, because they need to get a good deal. I am very, very close with all of my investor clients. We do dozens of deals with a very few select people who need to get very, very good priced product in order to meet returns per se. I'm just curious to get your thoughts here of is there something I'm missing, or I should try to be pushing more on the seller side, drastically? I'm just curious to get your thoughts here.
You can't be all things to all people.
Sure.
Right. If you're getting an exclusive from the seller, your fiduciary responsibility is to get the highest price possible.
Of course.
And it's just when you're only doing one thing. If you're running around representing a buyer, yes, you want to try to get them the lowest price, best return, etc. But that is completely alien to me. I've never done that. And so to me, this is going to sound bad, but I don't care if people make money when they buy or not. I don't care if they hit their returns.
Sure.
If somebody's willing to pay X for a property and that's more than anybody else is willing to pay, that's what I want to get from my seller. My responsibility is to get the pricing, the best possible pricing for my client.
Of course.
And I create a level playing field for every buyer, but I am completely agnostic as to who buys it. Whether it's somebody I've sold 100 buildings to or somebody I've never done a transaction with, playing field is level. Come in, pay more than anybody else. You know, it's interesting. There's a famous guy in New York City, Saul Goldman, who at one time owned more properties than anybody else. And his estate may still own more properties than anyone. But I met with him very early on. He was I think in his 80s at the time, and I was in awe meeting this guy. And I said, Mr. Goldman, how did you come to own so many buildings? He said, Bob, it was easy. I paid more than anybody else. And so, I've always been as a seller rep, my
Sure.
job is to get that information out to as many possible buyers as possible, create a level playing field so everybody feels they were treated fairly, get as many offers as possible, create a competitive bidding environment, and get somebody to pay more than they want to buy the property, but they do that because they know they have to if they want to be the buyer.
Love
And
that.
again, you can't be all things to all people in this business. And I have several market participants here in New York that will say to me, Bob, I will never buy a property that you're marketing. Never. But if I ever sell, you'll be my first call. And you can't be all things to all people. So you have to decide what you're going to be. And I represent sellers. I just try to maximize price.
Sure.
And that's been the approach that's worked for me.
Thank you for the insight. I appreciate that. So I'd love to dive into a couple of these questions, which there was a lot, so we might not get to all of them, but kind of just rapid fire, whatever comes to you. So I appreciate everything you've shared with us so far. I'm curious, what do you feel like is a reasonable return in the market today?
It depends on the property type.
So
I think you have to look at reasonableness, and that probably changes week to week given how interest rates have been fluctuating. But I think it's not about the absolute percentage. It's more about the spread between lending rates and your rate of return, and then also looking at the upside or downside in that potential property. So where are you going to be going in, and then where are you going to be on a stabilized basis? Those can be two very different things. I just sold a property that is a large multifamily property that was sold at just above a 4 cap, which sounds like a crazy low price, but within 18 months, it probably will be performing at well in excess of a 6 cap. So I think it depends on property type. It depends on the spread between borrowing rates and where you are going in, and then where you're going to be at stabilization. So I can't give you a specific number.
No. Well said. So what do you think is the most important when it comes to investment sales? Is there like a mindset? Is there a specific skill that you feel like people should have? Like, what do you think is the most important aspect of investment sales?
I think the most important aspect that is a predictor of success, three things. One, specialization, be an expert at something, know your market better than anybody else.
Mhm.
Two, passion. You have to have passion. You have to love the business, mainly because no matter how good you are, you're going to have tough times. And it's the passion that will drive you through that. And then thirdly, you have to have discipline. Discipline is so important. A lot of what we do is not fun. Sitting there banging out, dozens and dozens of phone calls and doing these fundamental blocking and tackling things, which I always say this is a blocking and tackling business.
Sure.
And you have to do those things over and over and over again. Put your head down, grind through day after day, week after week, month after month. Having the discipline to do that is really, really important. Abraham Lincoln famously said that discipline is choosing between what you want now and what you want most. And you have to focus on what you want most, and you have to do all those things. So I think that's it. It's specialization, passion, discipline. If you have those three things, the likelihood of success is very, very high for you.
So well said. I'm loving this. Next question is, what were some of your biggest mistakes or maybe regrets you may have had in your career?
Well, number one, I think that every time we hired someone else to do something that we were doing, that was not our most effective use of time, there was a huge increase in what we did. If you read Benjamin Hardy's book, wrote a great book with Dan Sullivan called Who Not How. And the premise of the book is that every time you ask yourself, how am I going to get this done? You're asking the wrong question. The question should be, who's going to do this for me? And it's so obvious when, when we hired that, Paul and I were interviewing everybody. When we hired that director of HR, our time opened up so tremendously. We were doing the books for many, many years ourselves. As soon as we hired a CFO, the time that opened up was so great. So I think, number one, doing things by trial and error was a big mistake that we made. We made thousands of mistakes. Fortunately, we didn't make a lot of those mistakes twice, but we should have sought the advice of people who had been there and done that. It would have saved us from making a lot of mistakes. That's a regret. Other regret was I wish we had understood the power of having other people who are experts at their particular field do things rather than us trying to do everything. Those are two big learning lessons. And I encourage people, if you don't have a personal assistant to do your administrative work, there's a saying, if you don't have an admin, you are an admin.
That's right.
So leverage your time, try to spend as much time doing what you do best. If you read again, Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan's book, 10X is easier than 2X, they will tell you that if you look at all the tasks you do in a typical week, 20% of those tasks will make you 80% of your money. So you have to spend as much time doing the 20% stuff as you can. And with the other 80%, either delegate it to somebody else or don't do it. And that is along the premise of what we're talking about, is try to use your time as effectively as you can, have other people help you, try to gain insight from other people who have been there and done that so that you don't make mistakes unnecessarily.
What is the biggest difference between realtors who make $100,000 a year in commercial real estate versus agents who make $1 million?
Probably the amount of hours they work. And it's interesting, back in the MK days, we had hundreds of brokers come and go. And it was always the people who were in early, got in 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning, stayed till 7 or 8 at night, and that did the best. And other people would say, well, what the heck do they do at 7 o'clock in the morning? Why are they in so early? What are they doing when they stay so late? And we'd say, we have no idea what they're doing. We know they're here early, they stay late, and they're making a hell of a lot more money than you. So figure it out. I think a lot of it has to do with the effort you put in. This is the thing I love about brokerage, especially investment sales brokerage. It is the ultimate meritocracy. You get out of it what you put into it. If you put in a lot, you're going to get out a lot. And I think that's the biggest differentiator that we see in the folks who are mediocre or do well or really are the ones who are at the top of the game.
So I'm curious to understand around like the real true top of the game. Agents who, because there is still a substantial difference, not only from 100 to 1 million, but even from 1 million to 8 figures, because there's a lot of brokers who do that. What do you think is the biggest difference between, $1 million earner or a several 7-figure or 8-figure earner in this business? Besides,
again, it's the expertise. Can you deliver something of value in every conversation you have? Are you a market expert? Are you creating a market presence campaign such that a lot of your business comes to you rather than you going to find it, right? You have to have market presence. Are you making your calls every day and every week? Are you sending out email blasts? Are you sending out texts? Are you sending hard mail? Are you networking? Are you meeting people? I've often said in the investment sales business, particularly in private capital space, it's not who you know, it's who knows you.
Talk to us about your first deal. What was your first deal? How'd it go? What kind of asset class was it? Price point?
The first deal was a 20,000 square foot vacant furniture warehouse at 1421 3rd Avenue. We sold the building to AMI, American Medical International, for the first MRI facility in New York. Wow. And the building had a fire in it the night before the closing. And the owner called us up and said, oh my God, guys, there was a fire in the building last night. A couple of floors got charred out, and we were like, oh my God, how could this happen? The deal's going to blow up. We called the buyer, and he's like, I don't care. I'm going to gut the building anyway. Probably saved me a few bucks. So we were like, oh, we dodged a bullet. And then I remember being in and we were at the closing, but the conference room for the closing was relatively small, so we weren't sitting in the conference room. We were out in the reception area.
Mhm.
And I remember at one point the seller came running out of the room screaming, and she's like, "I'm not going to close. I can't believe you people." Blah, blah. And, we were like, this is our first deal, so our eyes are wide open. We don't know what's going to happen. And I remember sitting in that chair, and I had a penny in my hand, and I was just kind of flipping it and playing with it and very nervous. And fortunately, the deal closed. I remember walking back to the office with Paul, and I don't think our feet were touching the ground. That penny is what we call the lucky penny. And I taped it to my desk. The lucky penny has been taped to every desk I've had since then in 1985. And that's the lucky penny story.
Yeah, because I saw you had talked about a very large deal. Maybe it was like a record-breaking deal, like 170, $180 million deal that you got a coin made.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's my lucky coin. That was the first $100 million deal that we did for Harry Maclau,
hmm,
selling a portfolio of apartment buildings to him to Richard Parkoff. Richard is and his son Adam are great clients and really extraordinarily nice people. They send a great holiday gift every year. And the year before, Richard had sent me this Tiffany coin, a silver coin the size of a silver dollar, and with a note that said, "Bob, I hope the next deal we do together, this coin comes up heads for me." And so we ended up making that deal. It was a $179 million deal. I think 6 buildings, 786 apartments, and I had the coin engraved,
wow.
MacLeod to park off with the date and the price. And I carry that with me every day.
What was your biggest deal you ever did?
Was about $680 million deal that we did for Watchtower, which was a big nonprofit organization in Brooklyn. It was 2 properties. One was a very large, about 1 million square foot vacant commercial facility, along with a development site that was an entire square block where you could build another 1 million feet. And so that was several years ago, but the total price there was about 680 million.
How long did that take to close?
Not long. The closing was not the issue. Finding the buyer who would pay the
That kind of
right
price.
price, because it was a complicated deal.
Sure.
But closing, I think the closing was typical 90 days.
What's your thoughts on cold calling today?
It is the gasoline that drives the engine. Everybody has to cold call. If you have a defined market that you're specializing in, those cold calls aren't cold anymore. They're warm calls, because you've probably spoken to those folks many, many times before, but we refer to them as prospecting calls, but you have to make them. And the only way to make sure you're making them consistently is by blocking the time out at least 2 weeks in advance. I'm sure for everybody listening, if you looked at your calendar for this coming week, you can't find blocks of 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours to block out to make calls. There's too much going on. You have to look 2 weeks, 3 weeks in advance to block that time out. But block the time out, make sure you make the prospecting calls. I think it's the most important activity that you can possibly do to be successful in this business.
Speaking of schedule, I'm curious to get your thoughts. What is like a perfect, like you're talking to a new broker who, let's just say, just started working with you. What is like a perfect schedule in your mind?
Well, I think wake up early, very early, 5 o'clock or so, 5:30, get to the gym, get your workout in. You got to take care of yourself. Get your workout in, and then, get your day started. Do a lot of the non-interactive activities before 9 o'clock. Block time out for calls, try to meet with a couple of people a day, mix in a networking event after 5, more either networking or non-interactive activities, and work late, get your email box cleaned out, and rinse and repeat.
What would you say to a newer agent? Maybe he's been in the business for 12 months, doing everything that you're mentioning, doing the calls, doing the hard work, just has not seen the success yet, hasn't gotten that big check yet to see that it's real and what's possible in this industry. What kind of advice would you give to them?
I would give them advice to think of the stone cutter. Stone cutter has a big rock in front of them. big block, takes its hammer, and the stone cutter pounds the rock, and pounded the rock 99 times. And on the 100th blow, the block splits in half. The stone cutter knows it's not really the 100th blow that made that block split in half. It's the aggregation of the 100 total, the 99 that came before it that made it happen. So just have the belief that you have to put in all that work, and ultimately it's going to happen for you. But you have to do it. Everything, all the success is really a manifestation of everything that you've done over time. It's not just one thing. It's think of this, pound the rock. The stone cutter says, pound the rock. You got to keep pounding the rock, and ultimately the rock will split in half, but it's not the 100th blow that does it. It's the 99 that came before it that makes that 100th blow successful.
What would you recommend in regards to investment personally? Now, because obviously we're both in the real estate world. Obviously, I'm imagining you're a big real estate guy when it comes to investments. Is there any advice that you have in regards to buying your first investment deal or your next investment deal to younger brokers out there?
Yeah, well, you know what, Henry, I'm not the guy to talk to about investing in real estate. I invest very conservatively. I always thought two things. One, up until the time we sold MK at the end of 2014, every waking minute I spent was trying to figure out how to make the company valuable. I didn't have time to invest in real estate. That was a different business to me. I was brokering and trying to figure out how to make the company successful and valuable. After we sold the business, I'm like, all right, what do I want to do now? It occurred to me I really love brokering. I want to keep brokering. I don't know about investing. And then it also occurred to me that if I'm making money, I'm making my living brokering in real estate, and then if I invest in real estate, if my income is going down because the market stinks and I want to rely on my investments, the value of my investments probably stinks too because the real estate market's not so good. So from a diversification perspective, that's not ideal. And I know there are several brokers that invest in property and do really well at it, and I wish them well, and I think that's great, but I invest very, very conservatively.
I am curious because you had mentioned making your company valuable. What were some things that you did in order to make your company more valuable? And then I'm curious, why did you sell it?
Number one, how do you make the company valuable? You continue to press the advantages that you have and take advantage of your strengths. Continue to get great people. A company is only as good as the people at the company. So finding good people, bringing good people on, training them, investing in them, leading with a servant leadership mentality where you want everybody in the company to do better than you, building self-esteem, having folks understand that what they're doing is integral to the business. It's interesting when you look at surveys about job satisfaction, the number one thing that always comes up at the top of those surveys is how important people feel that what they're doing is helping the company achieve its objectives. And so we always made people, whether it was our top producers or the receptionists, we made them understand how important they were to the overall objectives of the company. And it was interesting. You'd meet with the receptionist and say, you're doing such a great job of people walk into the office. You're the first point of contact. You greet them nicely. You smile. You offer them a cup of coffee. That's such a great thing you're doing to have people feel good about the company. And for the next several months, you'd see they practically be like greeting their long lost relative when people walked in the door. And having everyone understand that is really important. Making sure you retain your top people. It's so much easier to retain people than find new people. And so many companies don't focus on that. I think it's really crazy that they don't realize the assets that they have under their roof. But those were things that we did to enhance the value of the company, investing in training, investing in people, making people feel important, doing things to retain people. Those are really critical aspects.
And then in regards to selling it, like, was that always the plan, or, was there
Always
just...
the plan. Paul and I didn't start with a lot. We said, hey, let's grow something great and be able to sell it one day.
Hmm.
And our timing was really good, not through any fault of our own. You know, we almost sold the business in 2007. We got approached by a big global firm, almost made a deal for $50 million at that time.
Hmm.
For a variety of reasons, that deal didn't happen, but it taught us that when we did sell, we'd probably be on 5-year contracts. So in '07, we said, you know what? Paul's turning 55 in 2015. The perception of the value of these contracts is going to be much higher if we're in our 50s than if we're in our 80s. So in 2014, if the market doesn't stink, let's think about pulling the ripcord then. And we
Hmm.
got to 2014, the market was humming along, hired an investment bank, and got very, very lucky with the results, sold the business for $100 million. And,
Amazing.
very, very lucky for us at that time.
So I'm curious if you, let's just say you're talking to your younger self again, right? Back to your 20s, just when you and Paul were getting started. What advice would you give them if you could do anything differently or maybe achieve a bigger result faster? Any advice you'd give yourself?
No, I think, just be an expert, create value, treat all your clients like they're a family member, give them the right advice, not the advice that's in your interest. I think if you give self-serving advice, people see through that really easily.
Mhm.
And understand that this business is a marathon, not a sprint. It's what you do every day that matters. Always do the right thing, whether everybody will know or nobody will know. And just be a good person, work hard. All of these things sound kind of trite, but they really do make a difference. And at the end of the day, I think good things happen to good people. And do the right thing, create value in yourself, be an expert, give people the right advice. I always say, if you treat your clients like they're a family member, you can't go wrong. That's what I would tell my younger self.
All right, last few questions for you. I'm curious, what is your vision for the future, for your business personally?
Yeah, well, I think interestingly, I'll take you back to 1984. I'm sitting at my desk, no computer, no fax machine, no cell phone. And you look at how the world has changed today over the past 40 years, dramatic change. I believe that over the next 5 years, the extent to which the market changes is going to be even greater because of AI. And I think the early adopters of AI are going to have a big advantage. I don't think anybody is going to be replaced by AI, but somebody using AI could replace you. If you don't get on board with AI, it's likely the result is not going to be great for you.
When it comes to AI, is there any software that you'd recommend for a new broker to look at or?
Well, I think there are many different types of software. It's more the functionality that's important. And there are things to use for marketing materials, for outreach, for prospecting. AI is impacting just about every sector of what we do
Sure.
as brokers. And I think the important thing is to understand what's out there, become familiar with it, and see what works best for you. It's like the old saying, what's the best CRM out there? The best CRM out there is the one you're going to actually use,
That's right.
right? So find out a lot about what's out there, see what you feel most comfortable with and what you're going to use, and then make sure that you do actually use it.
All right, last thing. How can myself and my audience support you and your vision, your goals for the next few years?
Well, anyone, if you know somebody in New York City that owns a property that wants to sell it, love to hear from you.
100%.
We often pay other brokers referral fees. Excuse me. So, feel free to reach out to me any time. I have a great suggested reading list for brokers. I have a piece that I wrote on the lessons learned over the years of running MK. We call them Knackle Nuggets.
Hmm.
Happy to share those with any of your viewers. You can always reach me at bob.knackle@jll.com, or I'm on social media. I'm on just about every major platform, so feel free to DM me. But always happy to interact with folks in the business.
We appreciate you so much. Last thing I want to ask is you created the map. I thought I'd just bring this up because I thought this was something incredible. I feel like you may be the only person I've ever read about and ever seen that has created a physical version of the digital landscape, which is I'll let you explain it, but I think this is the most incredible thing. Why did you do it? And I'm just curious, like, how much has that helped you doing it?
Yeah, no, it's the map is a 24-foot long, 10-foot wide Sanborn tax lot map, that sections of which were out in the field with me during the pandemic. I for years I wanted to know what the development pipeline was in the city to help me value development sites. I took about 220 hours during the pandemic to go into the field, walk every street of Manhattan, and identify every building under construction. Highlighted it on the map, subsequently been tracking every demolition permit, every construction permit, foundation permit issued by the city. I have clients come into the map room. I have a separate room at an undisclosed location in Midtown Manhattan, not in JLL's offices, where the map resides. I have clients come into that room. I'm learning something every day. They're learning something. But I think that the level of understanding of the development market based on that map is unparalleled. And it's been a great marketing tool, great resource. That room is a client magnet. They want to come in. They don't want to leave. And it's been a great thing from a marketing perspective for me.
Bob, I just want to say thank you very much. Someone who's accomplished so much is so willing to give. I appreciate your kind soul and your giving soul. I appreciate it a lot. Looking forward to hopefully being in touch and referring you a lot of business over time.
That sounds great, Henry. It's been so great to be with you today.
Likewise. Thank you so much, Bob, and be in touch. Thank you.
Take care.
Take care.